What if the single greatest skill you could develop for your career, your relationships, and your personal happiness has nothing to do with your technical ability, your intelligence, or your work ethic, but everything to do with how you make other people feel when they are around you? Dale Carnegie understood this truth nearly a century ago, and the book he wrote about it has never gone out of print, never lost its relevance, and never stopped changing the lives of the people who read it and actually apply what it teaches. How to Win Friends and Influence People is not a book about charm. It is a book about charm-it. Dale Carnegie was a farm boy from Missouri who became one of the most influential teachers of human relations the world has ever produced. He spent decades studying why some people effortlessly build loyalty, cooperation, and deep connection, while others, equally talented and equally hardworking, struggle to get anyone to follow them willingly. What he found was not a mystery. It was a pattern, a set of learnable principles rooted in the deepest needs of human psychology. When this book was published in 1936, it sold out immediately and has remained in print ever since, with over 30 million copies sold worldwide. By the time this analysis ends, you will understand why criticism never produces the change you want, how to make anyone feel genuinely valued in 60 seconds, why the most persuasive thing you can do in any conversation is to stop talking, and how the leaders and communicators who build the deepest loyalty all share one specific quality that most people never deliberately cultivate. Subscribe to the Book Vault right now, hit the like button, and share this with someone serious about building better relationships. We are building toward 100 subscribers, and every share brings this community closer together. The strategic breakdown fundamental techniques. In handling people, we begin at the foundation of everything Carnegie teaches with the section he calls fundamental techniques in handling people, and the very first principle he introduces stops most readers immediately. Carnegie opens by declaring that criticism is futile, not occasionally futile, always futile. Every person, no matter how clearly wrong they are, believes they are justified in what they did. When you criticize them, you do not change that belief. You simply activate their defenses, wound their pride, and create resentment that poisons every future interaction. Carnegie spent years studying this pattern and found it without exception. He uses the example of Al Capone, one of the most feared criminals in American history, who genuinely believed he was a public benefactor, providing people with what they wanted. The point is not that Capone was right. The point is that the most dangerous people on earth believe their own justifications completely, which means criticism aimed at changing their behavior will always fail because it attacks the one thing human beings defend above all others, their self-concept. Carnegie's first principle follows directly from this. Do not criticize, condemn, or complain, not because it is impolite, but because it simply does not work. The second principle Carnegie introduces in this section is the one that most people intellectually understand and almost no one consistently practices. Give honest and sincere appreciation, not flattery, which Carnegie distinguishes clearly from appreciation. Flattery is insincere and people sense it immediately. Genuine appreciation is the specific recognition of something real that the other person has done or contributed. Carnegie cites research showing that one of the deepest human needs, ranked above food and shelter by psychologist William James, is the craving to be appreciated. The leader, partner, or colleague who consistently meets that need builds loyalty that no salary or title can replicate. 6 ways to make people like you. The chapter that follows is the one most people associate with Carnegie's entire body of work, and it introduces what he calls 6 ways to make people like you. The first and most powerful principle in this section is the one Carnegie places deliberately at the top. Become genuinely interested in other people. Not as a technique, not as a performance of interest, but as a genuine shift in your orientation toward every person you encounter. Carnegie uses the example of a dog to make this memorable. A dog has no agenda. It does not want anything from you. It is simply delighted by your presence. And because of that pure, unperformed interest, it wins more genuine affection than most people manage in a lifetime of calculated social effort. The second principle Carnegie introduces is the one with the most immediate practical impact in daily interactions. Smile. Carnegie is not suggesting a performance of happiness. He is pointing to the research-backed fact that a genuine smile communicates warmth, safety, and genuine pleasure in another person's company in a way that no words can match and that human beings are neurologically wired to respond to immediately. He quotes a Chinese proverb he considered one of the wisest observations about human nature ever recorded. A man without a smiling face must not open a shop. The smile is not decoration. It is the first signal of genuine welcome. Carnegie's third principle in this section is the one that most consistently surprises people who encounter it for the first time. Remember that a person's name is, to that person, the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Carnegie documents this with example after extraordinary example. From Napoleon Bonaparte, who built legendary loyalty by remembering the names of thousands of soldiers, to Jim Farley, who built a political career on the ability to recall the names of 50,000 people. The name is not just a label, it is the person's identity concentrated into a single sound, and using it correctly signals that you see them as an individual rather than as part of an undifferentiated crowd. Win people to your way of thinking. We now arrive at what many readers consider the most strategically rich section of the entire book, the section Carnegie calls Win People to Your Way of Thinking. The opening principle here is one of the most counterintuitive insights Carnegie ever produced. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it, not because arguments are unpleasant, but because they never work. Carnegie documents case after case where a person won an argument decisively and lost the relationship permanently. The person who has argued into changing their position resents the process and quietly waits for the opportunity to reverse the concession. Real persuasion never comes from winning arguments. The most important principle in this section arrives when Carnegie addresses what to do when you know the other person is wrong. His answer challenges everything most people consider intellectually honest behavior. Never say someone is wrong directly, not because truth does not matter, but because saying someone is wrong directly is the least effective way to change their mind. It triggers defensiveness, wounds, pride, and instantly recruits all their intelligence against your position rather than toward the truth you are trying to share. Carnegie teaches instead to open the possibility of being wrong yourself, to approach the disagreement with genuine curiosity rather than confrontation, which disarms the other person and makes genuine reconsideration possible. Carnegie introduces the principle of letting the other person do most of the talking as one of the most powerful persuasion tools available. Most people enter an important conversation determined to state their case as clearly and completely as possible. Carnegie argues this instinct is backwards. The person who listens more than they speak, who asks questions rather than making statements, who draws out the other person's perspective fully before offering their own, is almost always the person who ends up with more influence in the exchange. People do not trust the person who talks the most. They trust the person who makes them feel most heard. Be a leader. The final section of the strategic breakdown addresses what Carnegie calls the qualities of leadership in human relations, and he frames it around a specific challenge that every leader and every person in any position of influence eventually faces. How do you change someone's behavior without creating resentment, without damaging the relationship, and without triggering the defensiveness that direct criticism always produces? Carnegie's answer is built across several principles that together form one of the most complete frameworks for constructive influence ever assembled in a single volume. The most powerful principle Carnegie introduces in this section is the one about changing people without giving offense or arousing resentment. He teaches leaders to begin with genuine praise and honest appreciation before addressing any deficiency. This is not manipulation. It is the recognition that human beings can only hear criticism productively when their emotional defenses are not activated, and genuine appreciation is one of the most reliable ways to lower those defenses. Carnegie uses the example of a dentist who applies Novocaine before drilling, not to deceive the patient, but to make a necessary intervention survivable. Carnegie's principle of talking about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person is one of the most disarming tools in the entire book. When a leader says, "I have made this same mistake myself," before pointing to someone else's error, they accomplish something that direct criticism never can. They preserve the other person's dignity, signal that failure is survivable, and position themselves as a fellow traveler on the path of improvement rather than as a judge standing above it. That shift in positioning changes the entire emotional dynamic of the feedback and makes genuine learning possible rather than mere compliance. Key lessons and insights: criticism never changes. Behavior, it only creates resentment. The first lesson Carnegie teaches, and the one that requires the most genuine behavioral change to apply, is that criticism in all its forms, direct, subtle, implied, or comparative, never produces the lasting change it intends. It produces defensiveness, resentment, and the quiet determination to justify rather than improve. Carnegie spent decades documenting this pattern across cultures, industries, and relationships, and found it without exception. The person who stops criticizing and starts looking for what to genuinely appreciate in others does not become softer or less honest. They become dramatically more influential because they stop activating the one mechanism that makes people impossible to reach. Practice this lesson this week by identifying one person in your life or work whom you have been criticizing, even internally, and replacing each critical thought with a specific question. What has this person done well that I have not acknowledged? What pressure are they under that I might not fully understand? What would genuine appreciation look like in this situation? Those questions do not require you to pretend problems do not exist. They require you to approach the person as a human being before approaching them as a problem, which is the order that actually produces change. The deepest human need is to feel genuinely important. The second lesson Carnegie builds the entire middle section of his book around is this. Every human being, regardless of their status, their achievements, or their apparent confidence, carries a deep and constant need to feel that they matter, that their contribution is seen, and that the people around them genuinely value their presence. Carnegie called this the desire to be important, and he argued that virtually all human behavior, from the greatest achievements to the most destructive impulses, can be traced to this one fundamental need being either met or frustrated. The application of this lesson is both immediate and transformative. Make it your practice this week to look for one specific thing to genuinely appreciate in every significant person you interact with, and to express that appreciation out loud, specifically and sincerely. Not a generic compliment, but a specific observation. The way you handled that conversation showed real patience. That idea you brought to the meeting solved something we have been stuck on for weeks. Those specific, genuine acknowledgments build a kind of trust and loyalty that no incentive structure or management technique can replicate. Use the other person's name and use it often. The third lesson Carnegie documents with example after example across every culture and every era is the extraordinary power of a person's name. The name is not just a label attached to an individual for the convenience of others. It is the concentrated symbol of their identity, their history, and their sense of self. Using it correctly, naturally, and specifically signals something that human beings are wired to respond to at a deep level. It signals that you see them as an individual, that you remembered them, and that they are important enough to you to have earned a specific place in your awareness. Build the habit of learning and using names deliberately. When you meet someone new, make a point of using their name at least twice in the first conversation. When you write to someone, use their name in the opening. When you recognize someone's contribution, use their name before and after the recognition. These are not tricks. They are expressions of genuine attention, and genuine attention is one of the rarest and most valued gifts one human being can offer another. Carnegie understood this before neuroscience confirmed it, and the research has consistently validated everything he observed. Let the other person do most of the talking. The fourth lesson embedded throughout this book is the one that most directly challenges the instinct of ambitious, intelligent people who believe that influence comes from having the best argument. Carnegie shows that genuine influence almost always comes from the opposite direction. The person who listens more than they speak, who asks questions rather than making statements, who draws out the other person's full perspective before offering their own, is the person who leaves every significant conversation with more trust, more information, and more genuine influence than the person who dominated the exchange with their own brilliance. Practice the discipline of deliberate listening this week in one important conversation. Set a personal rule that you will not offer your own perspective until you have asked at least 2 genuine questions about theirs, and listen to the answers completely without formulating your response while they are still speaking. Notice what changes in the quality of information you receive, in the other person's receptiveness to your perspective when you finally share it, and in the overall quality of the relationship that follows. Listening is not passive. It is one of the most active and most powerful things a human being can do in any conversation. Make the other person feel that the idea is theirs. The fifth and final lesson Carnegie teaches is the most sophisticated and the most counterintuitive in the entire book, and it is the principle that separates good communicators from truly masterful ones. People support what they help create. They resist what is imposed on them, even when the imposed idea is objectively superior to their own. The leader who understands this stops trying to install their ideas in other people's minds and starts asking the questions that lead other people to arrive at those ideas themselves. When someone reaches a conclusion through their own reasoning, their commitment to it is qualitatively different from any agreement they could have been argued into. Apply this principle in your next important persuasion challenge by replacing your presentation of the solution with questions that guide the other person toward discovering it. What do you think would happen if we approached it this way? What have you seen work in situations like this one? What would you do differently if you were starting fresh? Those questions are not deceptive. They are a genuine invitation for the other person's intelligence and experience to engage with the problem, and when their engagement produces the insight, their ownership of the solution is complete and lasting. The vault closing, what Dale Carnegie gave the world with this book, is something that no amount of technological change, cultural shift, or generational turnover has been able to make obsolete, because it is built on the unchanging architecture of human nature itself. The needs he identified to feel important, to be heard, to be appreciated, to be remembered, are not products of a particular era. They are the permanent conditions of being human. And the person who learns to consistently meet those needs and the people around them will always be the person who builds the deepest loyalty, the most genuine cooperation, and the most fulfilling relationships available to any human life. Here is your one specific action for the next 7 days. Choose one person in your life whom you have been taking for granted. A colleague, a family member, a friend, someone whose contribution to your life you have not recently acknowledged out loud. Find one specific thing they have done that genuinely made a difference. Tell them about it this week, specifically and sincerely, using their name. Not as an experiment, as a genuine expression of appreciation that you have been carrying and simply not expressed. Notice what that single act does to the quality of that relationship in the days that follow. The Book Vault exists to bring you the kind of human intelligence that changes not just how you think, but how you connect, lead, and build the relationships that make every other achievement worth having. If this analysis gave you even one insight that will improve an important relationship in your life, please hit the like button, subscribe to the Book Vault, and drop your biggest takeaway in the comments below. Share this with someone who is ready to stop trying to change people through argument and start genuinely understanding them instead. The vault is always open for those serious about building a richer human life.